What do you have there?
It's a book.
Do you scroll down?
Nope. I turn the page. It's a book.
Can you blog with it?
No. It's a book.
Well, can it tweet?
No.
Can it text? Can it Wi-Fi? Does it need a password?
No.
Can it do this?
No. It's a book. Are you going to give it back? No, but I'll charge it up when I'm done. You don't have to.
It's a book!
By Lane Smith.
I poured myself a glass of water and sipped it slowly, but I'd started to shiver and the glass clinked uncomfortably against my teeth. "Come home, Mum," I whispered. I sat down at the kitchen table and picked at the edge until my nail was sore. My feet were numb with cold, so I got up and walked round and round the table. It was nearly summer. Mum had gone out without a jacket, yet I felt deathly cold. I wanted to go back to bed and warm myself up, but I didn't want to wake Bliss or Baxter. I wished I wasn't the oldest. I wanted to be the littlest, like Pixie, with people telling me what to do. That was the scary thing. I didn't know what to do if Mum didn't ever come back.
If you were captured by a mad scientist and he was going to erase all your memory of books you've ever read, except one, what would you choose to remember?
I think I would probably choose Hetty Feather because it's my favourite out of my books, and I did quite a lot of research because it's about a Victorian foundling, and so that would be the one I would really want to keep.
Okay. And I know you probably get asked about 1 million questions a week or about that. What is the most asked one?
Oh, it's probably where do you get your inspiration from? And I never quite know what to answer because it's like asking you girls, where do you get your dreams from? In that sometimes when you've had a dream, it's because of something you've heard about or something you're worried about or something you remember. And other times, dreams just come straight out the blue. Yeah. And that's, you know, how I get my ideas. The only thing is you can't force them. You've just got to wait until something pops into your mind.
Yeah. And are you glad you're so successful? Do you sometimes wish you weren't so well known?
Oh, I'm very glad I'm successful. I had many, many years where nobody had ever heard of me. And if I went to parties and, you know, you're introduced and adults at parties, they always ask, what do you do? And I would mumble, oh, I write books for children. And they'd just been introduced to me and they'd say, what name do you write under? And I'd say, well, my own name. And then people would sometimes be quite rude and say, well, I've never heard of you. or just sort of say, oh, yes. But nowadays, quite a lot of people have heard of me, and that's lovely. I mean, that's not why I write books at all. I write books because I love to tell stories and like to live in the world of my imagination. But it is wonderful, after many years of not being known at all, that, you know, now if I go into a bookshop, there will be, down among the W's, quite a few of my books. That's smashing.
And I've got a question from Lara, aged 9. She says, I live in Peru and have never lived in the UK. Have you ever thought about setting your stories outside of the UK?
I like to write about the sort of people that I feel I really know well, and it's quite difficult if you go to a different country. It takes you a long time to understand exactly what people think or what they're like in their own private homes, but a lovely idea.
And And she'd like to know also, do you like travelling overseas?
I do like travelling overseas. Last year I went twice to America, once for holiday, once for work. I went to Japan, which was very exciting, to something called an International Pen Conference. I went to Dubai, which was wonderful, for a literary festival, and I went to Paris because my daughter teaches French, and every year we always have a mum and daughter holiday in Paris, which is lovely.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Smashing question.
Are your characters based on real people that you know? They are very lifelike.
That's what I try and do, Lottie. I try and make them seem as real as I possibly can, but nearly always they're made up, and they're not based on me when I was a little girl, because when you think of some of the awful things that happened to the children in my books, I would have had the worst childhood ever. So nearly always I make things up, but just occasionally, if I meet somebody and they've got some interesting item of clothing or they tell me a little funny story, I might just use a tiny bit from somebody else, but I would never put a real person in my books because it's more fun to make it up and they might not like it the way I portrayed them.
When did you decide you wanted to be a writer, and were you any good at writing when you were my age?
Right, well, I decided when I was even younger than you that I wanted to be a writer because I know I had had my tonsils out when I was 6, and when I went to the hospital, the doctor there, when they talk to you before they give you an operation, they try and put you at your ease, and he asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, and apparently my mum says I said I want to be a writer. Whether my stories were any good or not, I don't think they were particularly. But I've kept some of them, and I can see similarities in that I always like to write about children with problems, and I always tried to put some funny bits in as well as sad bits, but I think I would blush if I ever had to read them aloud.
This is a question from Emily, age 6. You've written loads of books. Which one was the most difficult to write and why?
Which one was the most difficult? I think a book called Lola Rose, which is a book for slightly older girls, I think, and it deals with really quite worrying things like a pretty violent dad and also a mum who gets really ill. And I wanted to write about things truthfully, but I didn't want to worry children, particularly if their own mums were ill. So I did think long and hard about how I was going to do that. But in Lola Rose, my favourite adult character appears, Auntie Barbara, who comes along and looks after these 2 main children and makes them feel that everything's going to be all right. And I feel we all need an Auntie Barbara in our lives to come along and sort things out for us. That your questions, darling? They're very good too.
When did you first realise that your writing was worth something to someone other than yourself?
Well, that's an interesting question. Well, I suppose it was when I first started to get fan letters, and my books didn't used to be tremendously popular, but they were always about girls who were odd ones out. And so I started to get letters from girls who felt that nobody else understood what it was like not to fit in with absolutely everybody else in the class. And those early letters meant the whole world to me because I thought I am reaching exactly the people that I want to reach.
Do you find it easier to write your ideas before you start the actual writing, or do you like to see where it takes you to start with?
I jot down just a few sentences when I get an idea, but then I know this possibly irritates some school teachers where they try and get people to make plans and write it all out carefully beforehand, before you actually get started on the story. Well, actually, I find that a bit boring. I like to have some vague idea what we're going to write about and then just sit down I still write with an old-fashioned pen and a notebook and just start writing, and it's almost as if my pen gets carried away. And sometimes you can ramble a bit, but often I find it more interesting just to do it that way around.
Obviously, you write about some very touchy and controversial topics. So do you ever find it hard writing about such bad things happening to your characters?
I do sometimes, well, I do feel I put them through a hard time, certainly. Twice I've got really upset as I was actually writing. Mostly I'm kind of completely cool and knowing what I'm doing. One time in a teenage book of mine called Kiss, I got upset writing a scene there and actually had real tears. And the other one was a book called My Sister Jodie, it's the only one of my books that really does have a sad ending. And I didn't mean it to have a sad ending, but I was writing it and it was just as if I couldn't help it. I just thought, I know what's going to happen. And then I thought, no, I don't want it to happen. No. But it just carried on. It was almost as if I was taken over. And I did get very upset in that last chapter. But and I did worry about upsetting lots of my readers. And most people who've read My Sister Jodie said it did make them cry. But they said they didn't mind. They quite liked having a weep.
And finally, I have a question from Joanna, who's 14. If you could meet one of your characters, who would you choose?
That's an interesting one. Well, I think probably it would be Hetty Feather, who's quite dear to my heart. And she could tell me, because she's Victorian, she could tell me all the things that you can't find out about in Victorian social history books. So she would be a lovely character. And then, although mostly I invent girls, I do occasionally write about boys. And I invented a boy called Biscuits, who appears in 3 of my books. And I think he's a sweetheart because he's very kind, he's very funny, excellent at making cakes. I'd like Biscuits to come and live with me. I think he'd be a good companion.
Thank you.
Well,
That's all of the questions.
Well done, Lydia. I truly have never had such interesting questions. It's been a treat answering all of them.